podcasting is a start. You engage people. You raise. Well, I don't think we have to raise consciousness. I don't think that's an issue. I don't think awareness is a problem, but you engage people in activism. If we're not going to fight back, then we may as well just lay down and surrender. And I'm not ready to lay down and surrender. I'm not surrendering the nonprofit community. These 1.4 or 5 million vibrant nonprofits, the work that they do, I'm not surrendering that or any portion thereof.
Welcome to the PM Podcast, brought to you by DonorSearch, the show that takes you inside the lives of thought leaders, innovators, and changemakers in fundraising, philanthropy, and civil society. I'm your host, Jay Frost. A former attorney who walked away from law to find his true calling in philanthropy, Tony Martignetti has spent over 27 years helping organizations grow and thrive. He's the founder of Martignetti Planned Giving Advisors and the host of Tony Martignetti Nonprofit Radio, where he's been sharing expert insights and candid conversations with nonprofit leaders since 2010. In this conversation, we hear his journey from the AV Club to a nuclear missile silo, and from the comedy stage to podcasting and activism. I do want to ask you about your high school, because it seemed like you did everything then. And sometimes that frames what we do later. Were you on the radio station there?
In high school. Are we recording? We are recording, right?
Yeah.
Good. Okay, yeah, good. Okay, good. Not radio, but TV. I was in the, I guess it would be the intranet, but this, of course, was 1976 to 1980. It was my high school years. There was a show that aired in the cafeteria during lunch periods, and I hosted it. It was called Sports Spot, which is very ironic because I don't know the difference between baseball, hockey, and soccer and basketball. I don't know. One of them has goals and the other one has stealing, and I don't know which is which. But in high school, I interviewed the coaches of the various teams and the players for Sports Spot.
Maybe we can find a recording of something there and attach
I don't know. Yeah, I went back and looked, actually.
Really?
Yeah, some high school reunion. I talked to the AVA. Now, I was a member of AVA, was the audiovisual aids. But you have to understand now, this is 1976 to 1980. We were unaffectionately known as GAVA.
Okay.
We were the backstage folks. I knew how to thread a 16 millimeter movie projector when the teachers didn't. And when the film broke, I knew how to repair it. The film with the sprockets down each side. I knew how to put that film back together and then resurrect the history teacher's historic lesson by movie. And I operated the film strip projectors. And
I was just going to ask you about the film strip. It's just a step up from film strip to 16 millimeter.
Yes, where we had cassettes. You'd have a cassette with a beep, and that would advance the film strip. You all just, if you're under 55, I guess you'll just have to Google film strip projector, 16 millimeter film.
Transparencies. Yeah.
Transparent overhead
projectors.
So I was a member of AVA. We were proud audiovisual aids, but we had that disparaging moniker around us because we were then it was not cool to be a geek. It was not cool to be a nerd in 1976, 1980. Now you geek out, you nerd out. People's LinkedIn profiles say that they're a digital marketing geek. That wasn't the case in the late 70s and early 80s. And
that disparaging moniker, as you said, that was for people who are growing up in this era, the LGBTQ plus era, where there is more open discussion about who people are and identifying themselves the way they want and living the lives that they should be able to live, despite all the difficulties they are encountering with government and so forth. But that time, the language was very different.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Then that was a disparagement. That was I can't think of the exact word, but it was it was maybe not an epithet, but that's the word I was thinking of. But yeah, it was a disparagement to call us gay VA, but we didn't care. We were proud AVA members, audiovisual aids.
Hey, I want to ask you something about that, because I had a lot of that experience myself when I was young, because I did a lot of the art stuff, not the sports stuff. And so when I was in the public school system in Connecticut, you were in New Jersey.
Northern New Jersey, yes.
So that was the kind of thing that would be thrown at those of us who were in the arts or in the AV club or any of this kind of stuff.
Yes.
And it had nothing to do with,
Band was another institution that was, I was not a band member, but it was disparaged. You may have been, were you a band member?
Band, orchestra, chorus, theater. Yep, absolutely.
What instruments did you play?
Percussion mainly in school, and then guitar. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And drummers have their own. That's another thing entirely, is the way drummers are treated. But I wanted to ask you about that, because sometimes when you're on the receiving end of some of that, especially if it's this kind of, particularly gross disparagement, it can have an impact on us that makes us more sensitive to others later. Do you think that was true for you?
That's very interesting. You just made my synesthesia kick in. I got goosebumps. Synesthesia is when you experience something with one sense and then another sense reacts. Like I heard what you said and I got physical goosebumps. That's very interesting. I that could very well be the root of my, I don't know, I've just always been sympathetic to folks who live differently, whether it's the way you identify gender-wise or sexually or race, or, I have always been. So that could very well be. We were mocked. We were disparaged. I mean, it never got physical or anything, but, the kids thought it was jovial. My friends thought it was a laugh. Those of us on the receiving end, I guess my way of dealing it with was to laugh at it, not to have a backlash seriously. So, yeah, that's pretty insightful, Jay. Yeah.
Well, I did want to ask you about the laughter part, because that's a big part of your life. So do you trace that back to school as well as telling jokes, or was that even earlier?
No, absolutely. Absolutely. Elementary school, I'd say like 7th, 8th grade, and then through high school, I was a craftsman in self-deprecating humor, which meant I would do a lot of things that made people laugh at me. Not in an unruly way. I was a good student. I was on Dean's List. I was a good student. I got into a good college, mostly based on the kinds of activities we're talking about, like extracurricular activities. I think that's what got me into Carnegie Mellon University for my undergrad. But, so I was a good student. I was a B plus, A minus student, something like that. So I wasn't an unruly student, but yeah, I would, in the parlance of those times, I would mock myself. I would make fun of myself to get people to laugh.
Yeah, that's interesting, because a lot of people tell jokes at others' expense to get a laugh. Some people, it's self-disparaging.
And that has been probably the beginning of a through line. I did stand-up comedy for a number of years in New York City, and a lot of that humor was also self-deprecating. And I learned in these early years, we're talking about elementary school, high school, that if you make fun of yourself, nobody can complain. You're always a safe target. If you're the target of your own humor, there's nobody to complain. You haven't offended anyone. And I haven't offended.
Plus, it's kind of a force field against others attacking, isn't it?
Yeah. Now, I mean, I don't do political humor, so that's never been in my ballywick. But if you saw me do stand-up comedy in the city, you would hear me tell a story about unrequited love in 7th grade, me and Lisa Maggio, which very interesting this could be a little digression if you want. And a turn of our times, I was slightly modifying that story, and I was telling it in professional settings. I was opening conference sessions and webinars with it until one day I got a lot of comments about me being misogynistic and hating a seventh grade fellow student, the girl who was not reciprocating my affection. And I haven't told that story in a non-comedy setting since. But for years and years, that was a perfectly appropriate professional opening to some planned giving trainings. But the times turned, and it became a story of misogyny. And so it only took one webinar of negative comments for me to stop telling that story. But that was a story of unrequited love. I reached out, I asked to date this seventh grade girl, Lisa Maggio, and she didn't reciprocate at our seventh grade dance. So that's a bit that I used to do in stand-up comedy. There was another one where I was in the chorus. You mentioned you were in the chorus. I was in the chorus, but I was singled out as a bad voice in the chorus in public, among the seventh and eighth grade chorus. I was called out selectively to sing a solo, and then I was offered the position of page turner for the piano player.
Oh, wow. Who
Because
did
my
that?
voice was so, my solo audition, or not audition, I was already a member, but my solo, he heard a bad voice in my vicinity, and he asked me and a couple of others, Cheryl Sisto and Lisa Maggio, the same Lisa Maggio, they used to be next to me. I was an alto. He heard trouble in the altos and asked each of us to sing a couple of bars, and he singled me out as the trouble that he heard. He brought me down from the bleachers and offered me the job of page turner for the piano player.
Did anybody ever complain about that story?
No, I'm the victim. It's all about my bad voice in seventh grade chorus. Seventh and eighth grade. So I was humiliated in front of a bunch of eighth graders because I was in seventh grade at the time. And by the way, I refused that job.
Oh, the page turning.
Oh, actually, I walked out. I'm not gonna be page turner for the piano player.
Wow, well, that says something about you right there. You walked out, and this was school, it was an official function. They told you to take this job, and you said no.
Right. I walked out. I quit the chorus in front of the chorus. They were all lined up on the bleachers.
I wonder if this kind of raised your riz, or whatever the kids would say now, in front of Lisa Maggio and anybody else that you may have had an eye on.
Could have. Well, you'd like to think it would have increased my stock with them. I think that came before the incident at the dance, seventh grade dance, when I asked her to go steady with me, and she turned me down.
Wow.
In favor of Albert Moran. That's the love triangle that my comedy bit was about.
Maybe it was really all about the page turning after all.
I wasn't going to take it. Even if Lisa had encouraged me, I wouldn't take it. I was offended. So,
Tony, I mean, we're making light of this, but have you, sometimes we carry these relationships with us our whole life. Sometimes they're just the stories, either real or apocryphal. They're a part of our narrative, but sometimes we actually maintain those relationships. Have you talked to, for example, Lisa Maggio later? You probably didn't talk to your choir teacher after high school, but have you maintained contact with her or the other altos? Any of that?
Cheryl Sisto came to a reunion, and we connected there. Yeah, Lisa has not come to reunions. I think we are friends on Facebook, but the last time I was on Facebook was probably 12 months or something. I'm not. So no, I really have not talked to. I haven't talked to Lisa since. Well, we went to high school together, so I would have known her. We were still friends in high school.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I know we're spending a lot of time in high school, but sometimes it kind of frames who we become.
These are formative years. Absolutely.
They are formative years.
I'm grateful. Yeah.
But you grew up in New Jersey. What was your family like? How many kids in the family, et cetera?
It was me and my brother. He's 5 years younger. My dad was an elementary school teacher, taught instrumental and vocal music. Yes.
Wow.
Yep. In the Ridgefield Public Schools. When I don't know if music is still taught, but he taught instrumental and vocal, and he used to go around to the classrooms for the instrumental music. He didn't have a dedicated classroom that people came to him, students, and these are elementary school. I think it was kindergarten through 4th or 5th grade. Those are the grades he taught. But he would go around with his cart, and he had a box of instruments like tambourines and recorders. Remember the recorders, the little plastic clarinets? They're not flutes.
They still do it in elementary school.
They still have recorders? Okay, tambourines and triangles. I can't think of other instruments that he might have had. Maybe harmonicas, I'm not sure, but definitely tambourines, triangles, and recorders. And he had a record player, and the kids would learn. And he would enter the classroom, and he would sing, "Good morning, students." And they would sing back, "Good morning, Mr. Martignetti." And so they would learn quarter notes and 16th notes through those little phrases. And so that was my dad, elementary school music teacher. And my mom worked in the home. Was a housewife in the parlance of those times. Until my brother and I both left the house at 18, and then she started a career.
Really?
After her career raising us.
What was that career?
She worked in a credit union in mortgage lending.
Yeah. Wow. That's pretty formidable stuff. Before we move away from all of that, if your dad was a music teacher, was there much music at home?
Oh yeah, I dabbled. My brother also dabbled, but we just didn't have the DNA. We didn't practice.
But it was in your ear. It was happening at home, and
yeah, Dad would play records. Oh yeah. We had a record collection. We had a good stereo. Dad would play jazz sometimes at home. He was also a professional musician in a band that did weddings and bar mitzvahs and bowling tournament dinners, things like that. Bowling league dinners. Yeah, he was a percussionist also, like you. His major, he went to Manhattan School of Music. His major was percussion.
Oh.
So he was a drummer. We had the drums. I remember helping my dad load his drum kit into the car when he would go to gigs for, like I said, weddings and bar mitzvahs and things, bat mitzvahs. I used to help him set up his drum kit. It was Ludwig, and he had Zildjian cymbals. And I fell in love with all the stainless steel, all the stainless steel snare drum stand and the cymbal stands and the connecting rods that put the tom-toms on the bass drum, those stainless steel rods, and the hi-hat cymbals with the left foot with the hi-hat, right foot on the bass drum. I used to love to help him, move his kit into his car and then also set up his kit, if he was going to rehearse at home.
Yeah. So you were kind of more just soaking it in rather than jumping in and playing yourself.
Well, I did dabble in playing, but there you are. There again, I was backstage, right? I was a roadie. I was a roadie for my dad. It was backstage, AVA again, helping him set up, and then he was the musician. Yes, no, I did dabble in music. First the clarinet, and then I switched to drums. Those were both in elementary school, and I just, like I said, I didn't practice.
You're not alone.
Yeah,
I'm no longer playing percussion, but you have a lot of stuff going on then in those early years in terms of being involved in a lot of things. So, right. I mean, obviously it was doing this sports spot, and it's great to hear, but also theater, I'm sure half a dozen other things, but journalism, was that a part of it too? Were you? Yeah,
I was in the literary magazine club. Yep. We published a literary magazine of poetry and short stories. Probably just once a year. I think we came out with a publication, a small book, small soft-covered book, once a year of I think it was all student submissions, poetry and short stories. Yeah.
But no newspaper?
There was a school newspaper. I dabbled in that. I can still remember the advisor for that. Well, I remember the advisor for the literary magazine too. It was Nick Hahn, my English teacher in high school, and then Rudin. Was it Jerry Rudin was the newspaper I only dabbled in the. I wasn't an active. I wasn't. I didn't have longevity in the school newspaper, but the literary magazine, Backstage, AVA, and then I was also sort of backstage for a lot of sports teams. I was the manager of the soccer team, so I carried the bag of practice balls, and I kept all the stats for the soccer team. Also, the basketball team. I kept stats for the basketball team also, as well as being team manager. I operated the scoreboard for the basketball team. I was the stadium announcer for the football team. These are all ironic because I didn't really know what I was watching, but I heard people yell in the audience, and so I would just repeat what I heard them say. I knew, that's how I got to affiliate touchdowns with football. I knew, touchdown, and that one I've kept that association. I know
touchdown
those
good. Yes,
I know those two go together, and yeah, touchdowns are good. So I was a stadium announcer for football. A lot of irony there. So I was the backstage, like supporter type for football, soccer, basketball, wrestling. I was the gymnasium announcer for wrestling. 2 points, takedown. 3 points, reversal.
What didn't you do?
I was treasurer for the ski club. Yeah, I was like the finance manager for the ski club. You got to collect money for all the trips to Vernon Valley Great Gorge in New Jersey.
Yeah.
So I did that. Yeah, a lot of clubs. Well, I told you the extracurriculars are what got me into Carnegie Mellon.
Well, okay, so take us to Carnegie Mellon. What did you decide to study after doing every possible extracurricular activity and still maintaining a good GPA in high school?
I did some stuff. I was a member of a fraternity in Carnegie Mellon. I was an unsuccessful player on the soccer team. Actually, they did let me on to play the soccer, but I only played a couple of halves of a couple of games. I wasn't the head. I was the keeper, goalie, but second string goalie. And I'm still in touch. I'm still good friends with the first string goalie.
What were you studying?
Economics and information systems.
Why that?
Economics, I thought it was always a valuable degree. Valuable, I always had an interest in social sciences. I was more drawn to social sciences than what Carnegie Mellon is best known for, actually, is engineering. And also dramatic arts, very strong in dramatic arts, but I was neither of those. I was in the social sciences. I don't know, economics. I liked my microeconomics course in high school. Mr. Blum, I'm pretty sure it was Mr. Blum taught economics. Business kind of appealed to me. The numbers behind business, the rationale, where to locate a business, how many, how far, what do you look for in demographics or business location? And I think I even took a course at CMU on location. But microeconomics. And then, so I was in college, 1980 to 1984. Apple was emerging, the Macintosh, the first Mac was somewhere in there, 82 roughly. Could be off on that, but I was involved in sort of helping bring the Mac to CMU's campus.
Really? Mm-hmm.
And Steve Jobs was our graduation speaker, 1984. How many people
that must have made an impression.
How many people remember? It did. How many people remember their college graduation speaker? Ours was Steve.
I do. Because ours was Walter Cronkite.
Oh, well, yeah, another luminary, of course. Oh, my God. We talk about Walter Cronkite's legacy and what news has devolved into.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, Steve Jobs, he was my graduation speaker.
That's amazing. But you went from there and then you joined the Air Force. So help me understand that transition.
It was all economically driven. I was an economics major and I had to pay for college. Carnegie Mellon was beyond my dad's income, and there were no 529 accounts at the time. So the deal with my parents was that I could go anywhere I want for 1 year and they would pay for it. And after that first year, I'd have to find a way to pay for it myself or do my final 3 years at Rutgers, the State University of New Jersey. And Rutgers University at the time was not the very prestigious university that it is now has since become. So I really did not want to go to Rutgers. So I applied for a 4-year Air Force ROTC scholarship. I got waitlisted. I never got the 4-year scholarship. So I was good. My parents were going to cover me for the first year at CMU, which was my first choice. And that was a rare instance. I got my first choice. How often does that happen in life? CMU was my first choice, and I got in. And then I continued pursuing the Air Force scholarship, and I got a 3.5-year Air Force ROTC scholarship to Carnegie Mellon. So my parents were off the hook for the second half of my first year there.
You weren't really focused in on politics at the time. At least it sounds like you weren't. That wasn't one of the things you kind of checkmarked.
No.
But at that time, that was a very interesting time politically in terms of our relationship to the military. So I can understand you needed to have the resources to go to school. And how were your feelings about joining the military at that time, especially in the role that you ended up playing there? You were a missile combat crew commander, so we're talking about nuclear missiles. We
are. I did that. You're right. Thank you for your research. As they say in The Godfather, your people are very good. It was strictly a means to an end. I wanted to stay at CMU. I needed a scholarship. I also, concurrent to applying to the Air Force, once I got to Carnegie Mellon, I opened an application with the Army. I could just as well have gotten an Army ROTC scholarship, but the Air Force came through first. Maybe because I was waitlisted for the 4 years, so I got the 3.5-year from them. But it could have been the Army. Those were Reagan years. Of course, it was the Soviet Union. I'm not sure we realized at the beginning that it was the waning years of the Cold War, but they were Cold War years. And from CMU, I went into the Air Force to operate Minuteman nuclear missiles, the Minuteman II weapon system. And
there was a growth in our nuclear position. I mean, we were amassing more weapons rather than the other way around. There was a discussion about the Star Wars systems, and I think this was around the time, at least when you were there, it must have been the day after it came out, which was a really seminal kind of media moment for a lot of people, focusing in on what the potential risks were of nuclear war.
This was the era of mutually assured destruction, which a lot of people called mad or madness, but we had enough nuclear weapons to destroy the Soviet Union many times over, because at that period, you have to understand, at that period, the Soviet Union was our dire enemy. China was a very small economy. And they were a huge nation, but economically, in terms of GDP, they just were not in the top 3 the way they are now. Not even close, probably. So our dire enemy at the time was the Soviet Union. And we had enough nuclear weapons to destroy them and probably the entire Earth. And the Soviet Union had the same. So that was what kept us and kept them from launching an attack on us. Of course, we had a policy of no first strike with nuclear weapons. I think that emanated from the McNamara era. But that continued to be our policy. I couldn't even tell you who the Secretary of Defense was from 1984 to 1989. I was in the Air Force 5 years, 1984 to 89. Reagan was president. I don't remember who the Secretary of Defense was.
Caspar Weinberger, maybe?
Caspar Weinberger, could have been.
I don't know. What was your role exactly? Were you in a silo, or for those of us who don't understand that world, what was this like? What were you doing?
First, you spent 6 months at Vandenberg Air Force Base learning the weapon system. The weapon system was Minuteman II. And then there was a subsequent Minuteman III. Folks may have heard of Titan missiles. That was an earlier system. So Minuteman II was a crew of 2 officers, a missile combat crew commander and a deputy missile combat crew commander. And what you said earlier was spot on. I started as a deputy, and then I rose to missile combat crew commander in my 5 years there. And that crew of 2 commanded 10 Minuteman II missiles. So you'd go on a 24-hour alert. Yes, you were down underground in a launch control center, the LCC, Launch Control Center. That's where the crew of two were. Imagine an egg made of steel reinforced concrete, like 100, maybe 150 feet below the surface. That's the Launch Control Center. And that's where behind a blast door that was probably 18, 20 inches thick or something, with pins that retracted into the door and then expanded into the concrete reinforced shell. And that's how we entered and exited, through this steel reinforced blast door on big hinges. You used to have to manually pump the pins of the door to extend them into the shell and then to retract them to open the door to get meals. And then, that's where we had computer technology, which was, we were counting kilobits. You have exponentially more computing power in your smartphone than we had commanding 10 nuclear missiles in the mid 80s.
Is that a job that you get used to doing it? Do you get used to closing that big 20-inch thick door and sitting there with your, two guys who had probably guys at the time, with their fingers on the button or on a key or something? Or are you in a state of perpetual kind of, awareness and alarm?
You can't maintain a state of perpetual alarm for 5 years. No, it becomes routine. You have tests that you do. And just to clear it up, it was keys. A lot of people think, finger on the button, but we had keys. The deputy had a key and the commander had a key, and both keys had to be turned within 3 seconds of each other to launch any missile or missiles of our 10. There are tests you send out to make sure that the network is operational, to make sure that the missiles are receiving commands. Once in the 24-hour shift, you send weather out to each missile. We didn't know where they were targeted to. We knew they were targeted somewhere in the Soviet Union. We didn't know what, city or anything like that. We didn't have target information. We had launch capability. The missiles actually were remotely targeted. We couldn't, as I recall, we could not change the target. I don't think we could. So a maintenance team had to go to the missile and put a new targeting package physically in the missile. That's interesting. I don't think we had the capability to change targets. Yeah. No.
Were there any scary moments?
Yeah, but one time when I was a deputy and my commander, and this is a commander I'm still in touch with, we're still friends. We had a little smoke incident in the capsule, so you have to run the fire checklist, and we had to shut down the capsule due to smoke. I don't remember what ancient component was smoking, but we had smoke in the capsule. So there was that. But no, never, like an increased DEFCON, which was a defense condition. We were always I believe the DEFCONs went 1 through 5 at the time. We were always in DEFCON 4, which was just one up from the lowest. DEFCON 1 was like active nuclear war.
Yeah. But I guess I can understand you can't maintain this kind of state of alert for any length of time and still be human.
Right. You can't think about the awesome destructive power, millions of people potentially dying at your fingertips. No, you're trained, it's like anything in law enforcement, it's like anything in the military, that has a lethal capacity. You're trained to run checklists and take certain actions when you are presented with certain inputs. And you take those actions, you do them methodically and dispassionately because you trusted what was called the NCA, the National Command Authority, which was all the levels of control of nuclear weapons above the two of us in a capsule. So at our base, through all the Joint Chiefs, through the Secretary of Defense, up to the President. Those are essentially the National Command Authorities.
Yeah, and probably the same structure today, at least in theory.
Yeah, overall, I mean, the commands have changed. There's no more Strategic Air Command. That's what we were a part of, Strategic Air Command. That doesn't exist anymore. But we also don't have ground launched nuclear missiles anymore either. All those silos and launch control centers. And by the way, just a little jargon, where the missiles were, those were called LFs, launch facilities. So one launch control center controlled 10 launch facilities. There was one missile in each LF. Those have all been destroyed, exploded, filled in with concrete through strategic arms limitation talks, through the SALT. Remember the SALT era, SALT 1, SALT 2. And then they were open for overflight, so the Soviet Union could send its satellites over and verify that, because they knew the exact latitude and longitude of every single site, just like we knew all of theirs. They could verify that they had all been filled in. So we don't have ground-based nuclear missiles anymore.
When you think back on all that now, what do you think about that experience? Because sometimes when we look back on something we've done earlier professionally, we think, oh, I could have done this differently or that differently, but it doesn't sound like you could have done anything differently. But still, the kind of awesome implicit power, if you had decided together, now is the time to within 3 seconds turn those keys, or you had been asked to do so. Do you have feelings or thoughts about that in retrospect?
I look back on my Air Force career. All 5 years were spent there. That was Whiteman Air Force Base in Warrensburg, Missouri, which is now now it's a B-2 base because we don't, like I said, we don't have the missiles. It's now the home of the B-2. I look back with pride. We were a part of something, making me be a little teary, which I appreciate, because I think back very fondly. I'm still in touch with a lot of Air Force friends. We've had reunions through the years. But in the bigger picture, we were a part of helping ensure peace between the two antagonistic world powers, the United States of America and the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics.
Kind of an understood balance.
Yeah.
Well, but there probably wasn't a lot of humor down there in the hole. I mean, I don't know. You didn't have an audience to tell jokes anyway.
No, that was, I guess that was and the audiences in Warrensburg, Missouri, if there was no comedy club there that I can remember, but they would not have appreciated my New York City based, I grew up close to New York City, but I would call it New York City centric sense of humor. So, no, there was, I don't remember. Yeah, I guess the Air Force, I had matured. So I was no longer making people laugh by laughing at me. I had matured some, and that was a bit of a hiatus on my humorous side.
So you decided to do something that has been the bane of most jokes throughout human history, which is to go into law. So you went out and got a law degree.
I did.
And then, of course, embarked on this planned giving career, which I know we're going to talk about. But how did you decide to go from down there with, the nuclear keys, so to speak, to going to law school?
I always wanted a professional degree. I was not strong enough in math and science for an MD degree. I took what do you take to go to business school? What's that?
The GRE or?
No, GMAT.
GMAT, that's right.
Graduate Management Admissions Test, at least then. I don't know what it is now, but you took the GMAT. Yeah, my scores were middling. Yeah, not so good. I wasn't going to get into a decent business school. So I looked in law. And I don't want to make it sound like it was well, I guess it was the last choice. Medicine I was never serious about medicine because I just was not good in the lab sciences or math strong enough. So that was never really a serious contender. Business I was interested in. I had the economics degree and information systems degree, which was kind of a managerial, computer science degree at the time. Early again, graduated college in 1984. So that was my first interest, business, but then law was a close second, and I did well enough in the law school admission test to that I did not get my first choice of law school. Many law school admissions deans made it clear to me that I should go to Temple University School of Law. So many others decided for me that Temple was the place, because that's the only one that accepted me. So that's where I went. Probably a dozen. I even applied to law schools where I didn't belong. I wasn't qualified for, but so I thank many law school deans for leading, law school admissions deans for leading me to Temple University.
And you must have liked the law, because that became kind of your career in one form or another for years.
Loved it. I loved law school. I wish law school was 4 or 5 years instead of only 3. I loved the study of law. The practice of law did not appeal to me. I only practiced for 2 years. I was unhappy. We could, you're interested in this, so I sometimes wonder if I had taken a different career, a different job right out of law school, would I have stayed longer in the law? The job that I took was at a big law firm in New York City, and I made a lot of money. And I found it turned out to be a very unpleasant way to make a lot of money, and I only survived in the law for 2 years before I left.
What kind of law was that you were practicing?
Medical malpractice and general liability defense. So defending hospitals and doctors, and so those are major medical centers in New York City, and also defending mostly property owners, supermarkets, retailers against general liability. It means like trip and fall and slip and fall type actions. Yeah. Or if somebody got more seriously injured, or if there was some kind of an attack on their property, we would defend the property owner.
So you loved law school, but the job that you hated this.
The job that I wonder if would I have stayed longer in the law if I had taken, was I had an offer to be an assistant district attorney in the city of Philadelphia. I had done very well as an intern for the district attorney's office in Philadelphia. And I got an offer there, and I turned it down. I took the lucrative job in New York City. I was going to be closer to friends, because we all grew up in North Jersey, very close to New York City, Bergen County. So I went for money and friendships instead of public service, and so I wonder. I don't so much regret the decision, but I wonder, would I have risen to elected office, district attorney of the city of Philadelphia? I don't know.
Yeah, do you think about that, about a different journey? Because
not too often, but times like this, sort of, or I get talking about it. Yeah, I wonder. I would like to think I would have done very well and moved into major crimes and homicide, or maybe sex crimes, difficult litigation, but serving the public, all in the, again, like sort of the Air Force, all in the public good. So, I wonder. I don't know.
But you went out of doing that work, I guess, defending these large institutional clients, doing well, but I guess not having a heart for that at all, into this world of planned giving. So it was Iona, was that first?
Iona was first, yes. Your people are very good, research-wise. But before that, I actually started my first business, which was attorney career guidance. I was helping unhappy lawyers leave the law.
Oh, wow.
So in the parlance of our times now, I would have been a career coach, helping lawyers transition to other careers. But so I graduated law school in 1992, 2 years, so 94 to roughly 97, mid 97 or so. There was no such thing as a career coach. So I just called myself a career consultant, and I helped lawyers, mostly young lawyers, but some more senior, get out of the law into other careers. And that business didn't do all that well. I learned a lot of lessons in that business that I've applied in my planned giving consulting business. But it did okay. I was doing okay, but not great. I learned some lessons there.
What was the appeal? Were you kind of channeling your own experience and thinking people shouldn't have to keep doing this job that they hate? Or
yeah, well, I needed to make some money. Now I got I got a law school debt. My parents did not pay for law school, so I had enormous law school debt, and I needed to make some money. And I hated practicing law, so it wasn't going to be that. So I thought, I always had a penchant for like interview skills, resume writing. I did some coaching on that again, we weren't called coaches, but I did some work on that at CMU. I was helping like grad students with their resume writing. I think something like that in the grad school consulting, the grad school career office, something like that. So I had skills in preparing people for interviews and helping craft their cover letter and their resume for individual jobs, not just one resume fits all, but you craft each resume to the job that you're applying for. So you have 10 or 12 different resume versions and 10 and 12 different cover letters. You should. That still applies today. So I had a penchant for it, so I opened a business, Attorney Career Guidance on Lower Fifth Ave in New York City.
But that wasn't for that long, as you said. So I know you took the lessons for that and what you're doing today, but you pretty quickly went over into the nonprofit world, which is a wonderful place for those of us who love it, but it often isn't a very lucrative place. So how did you decide to make that decision, and where did that take you initially, those first few years?
As I said, Attorney Career Guidance was kind of lackluster performance. I was eking out a living, so I knew that was not really sustainable. And I had a friend who was a senior fundraiser at Iona College, and he was looking for a director of planned giving. And I made my pitch, and having the law degree and law experience helps because you are talking about legal documents often. But I am quick to say you do not have to be an attorney to be very successful in planned giving fundraising. Absolutely not essential. But if you have the degree, it helps. And so it helped me sort of bootstrap my way into director of planned giving at Iona College, which is now Iona University.
And you were there for how long?
Just a year and a half, I think about 18 months.
Oh.
And then I moved to St. John's University, also director of planned giving. I had started the program in planned giving at Iona, and I also launched planned giving at St. John's University in Queens.
Okay, so
there I spent 5 years there.
Okay. So you're basically going in, setting up the programs, running them. I'm sure, having that experience, it must have informed your view about what you could do inside that kind of institutional context. What was your feeling for it? How did that develop? Did you develop a passion for this? Is that because you share in many ways? You just talked about the coaching experience for lawyers looking to change careers. You talked about it. You talk about it all the time with your work today. How did you find yourself in this work? Was it this kind of coaching role internally with the organization, or were you finding a heart for it yourself and closing those gifts, meeting those people? What was it that kind of turned you onto it?
Yep, you just touched on it. Meeting those people. I love the relationships with older Americans, folks in their I'm in my 60s now. Then, in folks in their 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, I love those relationships, and I know how to build planned giving programs that will help those donors give to the institutions that they love, and also naturally help the institutions themselves. And it's that synergy when people who are passionate about a cause come together to that cause. The potential is enormous for helping future generations, which is typically what planned gifts are crafted to do. So maybe, sort of planned giving was a vehicle to the relationships that I sought after. You had to create a planned giving program in order to have a reason to talk to folks in their 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. So I gravitated to planned giving.
Why the interest in talking with older folks at that time of your life?
Oh, they're rich histories. They lived through the Depression, the Great Depression. They lived through at the time, there were some who remembered World War I, World War II, Vietnam, Korean conflict. They've lived through adversity. They went to school when, they were in college when tuition was, $8 a credit. They were all baby boomers. They lived through the Cold War. Periods of great economic prosperity in the United States. Post World War II, the 40s, 50s, the turbulence of the civil rights era of the 60s, the backlash in the 70s. They lived through all this. They were teenagers they were teenagers in the 70s. And come on, help me. What's the huge, the iconic music festival?
Woodstock.
They were teenagers and they were in their 20s at Woodstock. And I've talked to people who went to Woodstock. Just the rich history, the rich history of our elders. And it still moves me. My synesthesia is kicking in again because I'm speaking, but I'm getting a physical reaction to it. So,
I hate to jump ahead, but that is kind of where you are with much of your career now. You do. I know you're doing a lot on the coaching side, helping people set up programs, but you're spending so much of your the last how many years now with Nonprofit Radio?
15 years. We're in our 15th year of the podcast. Yeah, but see, I want to help others have the rich relationships with donors and potential donors even that I've enjoyed since starting in planned giving at Iona in 1997.
And you're getting that fix also. You're able to interview people all the time.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm back to Sports Spot.
I don't know how many elders you're interviewing, though.
No, more contemporaries and many younger folks, many younger folks, smart. So I don't interview elders, but I have great relationships with a lot of my clients' donors.
How did that whole process get started? How did you start the podcast?
Oh, well, it's a through line from Sports Spot. The backstage days, and then I like the backstage, but also stand-up comedy. If I see an empty mic, to me that is a lonely friend. I have to go up and speak to that mic. I get rapid heart rate, that tachycardia. Where maybe it's not formally tachycardia, but my pulse increases when I see an empty mic and a bunch of people.
Well, that's the thing about radio, though.
I'm drawn to it like it's a lonely friend.
You don't always see the bunch of people, though, when you're doing, a podcast, a radio show. They're out there in the ether.
No, I don't see them, but I know they're with us. I'm channeling our 13,000 weekly listeners in small and mid-sized nonprofits. Yeah, I'm channeling them. I'm thinking, what would I want to know if I was listening? What would I want Tony to ask? So I'm constantly channeling them.
So when you started this, it was before the podcasting boom.
Yeah, 2010. July of 2010 was our first Nonprofit Radio episode.
Who was
there were July of 2010. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, who were you interviewing in that show?
My very first show was I think I had a friend who I was doing planned giving consulting with, and it might have been Claire Meyerhoff, who talking about marketing, and she became she's still the creative producer of Nonprofit Radio. I have to shout out for Claire Meyerhoff because she had a background in traditional radio. She had been at at a Washington, D.C. station, WTOP, which I think still exists. She was on-air talent for, is it? Yeah, because you live in the D.C. area. Is
yes,
TOP
it sure
still
does.
on? Yeah. And then she moved to Sirius. Before it was Sirius XM. She had some time with Sirius. So she knew radio, and she helped me a lot. And she remains the creative producer of Tony Martignetti Nonprofit Radio. She was on one of my very, very early shows, if not the very first.
And when you're looking across that, are there any kind of, I know it's an easy question, but I am curious if there were any favorites as you've interviewed people.
Oh, absolutely. There's the time that Beth Cantor said "fuck" on the show. That's a favorite. That came from an NTC. That was the Nonprofit Technology Conference hosted by N10. Mm-hmm. That came from one of my NTC interviews with Beth. There's the time I was in studio for the first many years. We would produce the show at a studio in New York City on West 72nd Street. With that was Sam Leibowitz owned that. It was an apartment that he had converted to a studio, and then there was the time that someone almost had a heart attack in the studio because he was running. He was overweight. There was traffic. And he got out of his cab and he ran several blocks and he came into the studio very, very flushed. So I was a little concerned. He did not have a heart attack, but I was concerned. Lots and lots of episodes with Gene Takagi and Amy Sample Ward. Gene is our legal contributor. He's on many times a year. Amy, CEO of N10. She's our technology contributor. She's on many times a year. Lots of valuable shows with the two of them together, especially now in our political environment, but separately, lots of very valuable shows with them. Lots of great shows from NTC. I love bringing the show to the exhibit hall. This year it happens 2025. They're not calling it the exhibit hall. Now it's the hub. But in years past, it was called the exhibit hall, and we'd be on the exhibit floor, often with a corporate sponsor. So we'd be sharing a 10 by 20 booth with the sponsor and do dozens of interviews at each conference for future shows. Those are all great memories.
Well, you're making more of them every minute. I mean,
every week.
It's pretty vital. You're doing 50 shows a year, I think. Is that right? That's
right. We're coming up on show number 750 in July.
Oh, wow. Well,
15 years, 50
yeah,
years.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
But how has it evolved, and how do you imagine it evolving further? Because you and I have talked separately about a lot of what's going on. You've alluded to it a minute ago, politically, and how it's impacting the nonprofit sector. Maybe not always planned giving specifically, but you talk about a bigger range of issues, much bigger than just planned giving alone.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So how is the show kind of growing with that evolution that surrounds it?
Yeah, the show is in decline. I would say it's the host is middling. I brought on an associate producer. It's not working out. The show is in decline, deep decline. So I would say the denouement was probably 12 months ago or so. That was our peak. No, I just love doing nonprofit radio. I love picking people's brains for the benefit of small and mid-sized shops. How is it evolving? Yeah, we're more politically aware since last November than we ever have been. You know, the shows are not so evergreen. You know, a lot of shows, the vast majority of shows in the past, I could have replayed any time, and I have sometimes when I needed a show from the archive. But more politically aware now, you know, shows that are not evergreen but are essential to do. We cannot ignore. You know, I'm a little turned off by some content creators in our community who just seem to be ignoring, tone deaf to the political reality around us and the threats, explicit threats to our nonprofit community. I mean, explicit in some cases down to the organization, like NPR and Planned Parenthood. But the sectors under threat, all foreign aid, all the foreign aid nonprofits under threat with the USAID freezes back and forth, and yeah, I'm dismayed by content creators who are not reacting to and supporting the community during the threats that are coming from this new administration.
Why do you think that they're not tackling it, and what impact do you think they could have if they made a switch?
Why are they not tackling it, and what impact could they have? I hope they don't fear it. Maybe they do. Maybe it's self-censorship. But that's what authoritarian regimes aspire to. They don't want to have to crack down on your speech. They want you to censor yourself. So I hope it's not self-censorship. Maybe they feel it's not their bailiwick. You know, we're a fundraising podcast, so we're not going to talk about threats to fundraising and that are coming from the administration. You know, it's outside our realm. I don't know. To me, that's that's a rationalization. I think the community demands the support of all the members of the community, and that includes content creators. So big deal if you're in a marketing podcast. I think I don't think you can be silent to the to what's happening. We're getting some thumbs down. That's okay. That's okay. I still stand by. I think the community is stronger when it remains together, and that's why you and I, along with Beth Cantor, are co-hosting the Nonprofit Activist Coalition, because the community needs to stand together. I don't care. I don't care what named nonprofit is under attack. I don't care where it might be on a political spectrum. I would stand up for its rights. So if it's the National Rifle Association, I will stand up for its rights just as much as I'll stand up for NPR and Planned Parenthood. And so I think that's a disservice to the community when you ignore the reality that is just a maelstrom around us. I mean, it's every single day, multiple headlines per day. Yeah, I think it's unfair to the community and a disservice to your audience.
So do you think
you're not being reactive and trying to help the community while the community is under attack?
So do you think they could make a difference if they chose to start focusing on the stuff coming out of DC?
I believe yes. What came out of the shows that I've done is the Nonprofit Activist Coalition that the three of us are co-hosting. You know, I thought we need to do more than just podcasting. But podcasting is a start. You know, you engage people. You raise. Well, I don't think we have to raise consciousness. I don't think that's an issue. I don't think awareness is a problem. But you engage people in activism. If we're not going to fight back, then we may as well just lay down and surrender. And I'm not ready to lay down and surrender. I'm not surrendering the nonprofit community. These 1.4 or 5 million vibrant nonprofits, the work that they do, I'm not surrendering that or any portion thereof.
You said you got some thumbs down on some of the things that you've covered.
Yeah, did you see them?
Had some negative reaction?
A couple of thumbs down came down. No, this is the first time. But that's all right. You know, I guess we're live. I didn't really realize we're live streaming. We're live streaming?
No.
Oh. Well, I don't know where the thumbs down. Well, I was.
It may be just Zoom doing its magic.
Oh.
When we do something like this or like this, then
thumbs up or thumbs down. Does Zoom? Is there an AI?
There is. So maybe that's a good transition right there.
Well, you know what? Fuck that AI. I don't. That's another reason I'm concerned about AI. It doesn't have passion. Yeah, no, there was a thumbs down over in your frame. Not that you did it. I know you didn't do it, but for a minute I thought we were live streaming.
It's my talking too much with my hands, but but that's a really good transition, because you said that when you graduated from college, your graduation speaker was Jobs, right?
Yeah.
So you had that impact, and then you ran off and your career's gone lots of different directions, but you're interrogating in a very positive way everything and everybody. This is really what you do and what so many of us hear. The biggest question now has to do with, and all the questions have to do with AI in one form or another. And you just said, screw that. So where do you think AI fits into everything we're talking about, whether it's government or the nonprofit sector, fundraising specifically? Because it is coming for us even in the podcasting studio, where you can Notebook LM, you can generate a podcast automatically. What are your feelings about that?
Fuck AI is what I said. Yeah. Just to be clear on the record, I'm concerned. I'm concerned about AI. I want to have genuine conversations with people. So you're right. AI can create a podcast. I've heard clips. George Weiner, very smart tech guy, the CEO of Whole Whale, and I are heavily connected on LinkedIn, and he's not blind to the the potential downsides of artificial intelligence and ChatGPT, et cetera, and content creation by artificial intelligence. So he's not blind, but he's more he's more optimistic about it than I am. I'm concerned. I'm concerned that we're going to cede our creativity. And look, artificial intelligence can create music. I think a composer staring at blank. Are they called staves? Did I learn anything from my clarinet lesson? Aren't the music sheets? Are they called staves?
On the staff, maybe? I don't know.
The 5 lines.
Yes.
Maybe staves, staring at a blank composition sheet, or you and I staring at a blank Word document. I believe that is, and needing to fill it for some purpose. That is the most creative act that humans do. And we're seeding that first draft, whether it's music or text or art in all its many, many forms, seeding that most creative time to artificiality, and reducing us to editors or, highlighters on if it's an illustration or pencil drawing. We're now highlighting. We're copy editors of the text. We're whatever the analog would be for music composition, and that reduces us. That reduces our role, and it seeds our creativity at the most creative point. Staring at that blank Word screen and needing to fill it. I think that's the most creative time, and I don't want to give that up. So I don't use AI for my first drafts, even though it'll save me time. Supposedly, smartphones are supposed to save us time too. Do you have a bank of time that you've put aside? Thousands. It should be thousands of hours by now. Had smartphones for what, 14, 15 years roughly? I don't know. We should have banks of thousands of hours that we're just going to retire on. I don't have a bank like that. They increase productivity, although we're now seeing the downsides of that in terms of isolation, depression among young folks, increased suicide rates among young folks who feel inferior to the mega stars on TikTok and Instagram. So we're seeing the downsides of that technology now. And I think eventually we'll see downsides to artificial intelligence. So I don't use it. I don't use it in my practice. I don't use it in my podcast production. That's it. I'm not so sanguine as many of our colleagues are about the future.
So let me take you down another dark alley there, kind of wrapping up some of these thoughts, which is about comedy. You said that you did stand up. You have. It sounds like you're not doing a lot of it today, but one of the things that people talk about is with AI, that it has great utility and efficiency in some things, but it also doesn't necessarily have the same degree of empathy or creativity, the ability to think in ways that might make us also not just cry, but maybe laugh. So you just said you're not letting AI write your first drafts of anything. When it comes to a world where AI is increasingly populating everything on our phones and our Facebook feeds, how funny is that? And where are you finding the humor in the world, given that so much of our world is being automated at the service of this kind of efficiency?
Yeah, that's another great question. I haven't found humor in the artificiality of intelligence. I still find humor in just daily life. Listeners to the podcast know that on Tony's Take Two, I often have tales from the gym. I talk about different characters there. This week we're talking about Mrs. Blood and Soil, a woman who refused to cede her territory in an aerobics class. Revisiting. We visited with Mrs. Blood and Soil many months ago, but revisiting now because I just introduced myself to her. So I find humor in daily activities, from the gym, food shopping. There's whimsy and humor all around us. I haven't seen it in artificial intelligence yet. Not because I'm so dismayed by it that, I think it's all a tragedy. I don't think all of artificial intelligence is detrimental to us. No, not at all. Not at all. There is great value. I was just listening to a talking head talk about cancer research, and artificial intelligence can spot trends, micro trends in hundreds of thousands of patient records to spot a potential, for future pancreatic cancer that humans just do not have anywhere near the capacity for. So not only in medicine, but I see promise with artificial intelligence. Yeah. I don't want it flying our planes. I'll never get on a pilotless plane. I'll never be a passenger in a driverless car. No, never. Even 30 years from now, when I'm 90, I won't get in a driverless car. I
would
promise.
you go to a comedy club with a comedian-less AI telling jokes?
No, right? No, I would not buy one of the what is these robot dogs now? Right? Artificial dogs? No. I'm too much of a believer in humanity and soul, and neither of which, artificial intelligence is no humanity, and it has no soul. So I'm too much of a believer in the DNA of humans.
Well, that's it for this episode of the PM Podcast. If you would like to learn more about Tony's show, visit TonyMartignetti.com. Our thanks to our sponsor, DonorSearch, the world leader in AI and donor research for nonprofit fundraising. Our producer is Jack Frost, and our theme music is Moving Out, Moving In by Jay Taylor, and is provided courtesy of Epidemic Sound. If you like what you heard, make sure to subscribe wherever you like to listen. Check out our sister shows, Front Lines of Social Good and How to Raise, and come back next weekend for another conversation with a leader in the world of social good. Until then, this is Jay Frost. Thanks for joining me.